Hello and welcome back to the Lucid Dreaming Podcast, or welcome to the Lucid Dreaming Podcast if it's your first episode. I keep forgetting that new people show up every once in a while, so welcome to you as well. I have today on the podcast Jayne Gackenbach, who is a researcher and an author who writes about lucid dreaming and gaming and has done a lot of research in sort of the area surrounding dreams and games in all sorts of fascinating ways, and we get into all of that in all sorts of little ways, and I think you will find this enjoyable. Before we get to the interview, I want to share with you something that I came across in June. Another lucid dreaming podcast came to my attention, and this is not a usual your run-of-the-mill standard podcast about lucid dreaming or any other kind, as far as I know, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. But I wrote a little thing about it on the blog back in June, so I'm just going to read it to you right now. It's very short, and here it is. A little over a month ago, a lovely woman wrote to me to tell me she listens to the podcast and finds it inspiring. I get those emails from time to time, and I love getting them. It's a big part of why I'm doing the podcast. Some emails are just I simply had to write in and tell you how much I enjoy the podcast. Some are that plus a question or comment about lucid dreaming. And every so often I get hey, I wanted to let you know about my new site /blog/book/ fill in the blank about lucid dreaming. What do you think? This one came with a link to the podcast. There was no what do you think or would you share this on your blog or anything like that. She just said, I decided to start my own podcast about the experience of trying to become a lucid dreamer, to keep my mind on the intention of lucid dreaming and to keep me from giving up. She has been trying to one degree or another over time to lucid dream for around 40 years now and have yet to succeed. Although unlike the hero of our story, I've had lucid dreams before starting my podcast, I, in large part, also started it for similar reasons, to keep the subject top of mind and to allow me to dive deeper into it. Perhaps it was thinking that the title of the podcast sounded silly to my brain, or perhaps because inundated with a bunch of people's new lucid dreaming things, I didn't check it out right away, but I finally got around to giving it a listen, and not only did the podcast name make perfect sense, I absolutely loved it. This is not your usual lucid dreaming podcast. Not that there is such a thing, there's barely a handful of them. It is not some instructional guides or interview type of podcast. It is a strange, absurd, crazy, awesome story we get to tag along for. Our hero, named Prodigal D, is a geek after my own heart and a captivating storyteller whose silliness is only matched by her charm. The whole thing is infinitely endearing and absolutely hilarious. I honestly don't remember the last time I laughed so much listening to a podcast. I can't get enough of it. It is nothing like any lucid dreaming something or other out there, and it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it is a journey worth going on. So I encourage you to check it out. And the URL is lucidorbust.com, and I will put a link in the show note. And like I say here in my little article about it, it might not be for everyone, and it is odd and it is strange, and in fact it's different than most podcasts on any subject that I listen to, but it is absolutely awesome and I love it, and I hope that there will be more episodes of that podcast as well. Hint hint. So on to today's interview. Without further ado, I give you Jayne Gackenbach. So today I have with me Jayne Gackenbach. Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
And I was very excited to actually have you on the Lucid Dreaming podcast because your name has come up in my years of digging into lucid dreaming and reading about it and researching. I think your book Control Your Dreams is one of the first that I've ever purchased. You are an author and co-author of several books, a researcher, and can you give us just a brief overview of what it is you do when people ask you what do you do, and a little bit of your history?
I'm actually retiring.
Oh, wow.
You
Okay.
catch me at the other end. Let's see. Our dissertation was on lucid dreaming in 1978. It was the first in North America, and the psychological elements.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went on to found and edit a newsletter called Lucidity Letter and annual meetings for a society called Lucidity Association for a decade. Including doing research, edited the book with Stephen, Conscious Mind, Sleeping Brain, did my own book. And then in the mid 1990s, my son got a video game console, and that changed my life. But my initial interest, other than what the with his passion about it at age 8, my initial interest was I started to read the research. And one of the things that was really clear at this point, this was before all the, oh my God, video games cause aggression, before all that.
Yeah.
The early findings was the improvement in spatial skills. And in the lucidity research at that point, that's the one thing we were finding was frequent lucid dreamers had superior spatial skills, vestibular systems, the related. And so I thought, gee, I wonder if they're having more lucid dreams, if they're improving in the spatial skills. And so I began research, and we found that yes, they do. It's not 100%, certainly. I wouldn't say that's it. Play video games in order to have lucid dreams. You can play video games if they're fun. But there is that, and what is actually more robust is that gamers are much more likely to report being able to control their dreams. And that's for very obvious reasons. They're in an artificial environment, usually every day, sometimes several hours a day, often since early childhood. So we're talking 10,000 hours of controlling artificial worlds. So when they come across that in a dream, they just assume that they can take over and do what they need to do.
Yeah, fascinating. So I do want to get into the games and lucid dreaming part because this is definitely for me one of the most interesting things about your work. But I just wanted to briefly go back and ask you how you got into lucid dreaming and lucid dreaming research. I mean, what
I was
really?
in graduate school in the 1970s, and I had done my master's thesis on a feminist topic and was feeling a bit burned out by it. And I was having some dreams, lucid dreams, and was read Scott Sparrow's his original pamphlet on lucid dreaming, Celia Green's book, Patty Garfield's book, and some stuff on out-of-body experiences, specifically Robert Monroe, and then the near-death stuff. This is when all this stuff was coming out in the mid to late 70s.
Yeah.
And the near-death stuff. And, I was having these experiences, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. Maybe I just wanted to go a totally different direction from feminism. And so the idea was born.
Very cool.
And I became aware of, through Scott Sparrow, of the research project that had been done by the Association of Research and Enlightenment, the Edgar Cayce people in Virginia Beach, and I was in Richmond, Virginia, and doing my PhD, and they had done a dream project. Henry Reed had supervised it, and through conversations with Bob Vannycastle, Henry Reed, Scott Sparrow, they were all lived. Vannycastle was up in Charlottesville, I was in Richmond, and Reed and Sparrow were down in Virginia Beach, so I was halfway between them, and they all worked together. And so I applied for a grant to approach this group that Henry Reed already had a whole month of dream diary recordings from, to ask specifically about lucid dreams, and I was awarded a small grant. And I then, that was my dissertation population, were these members of the ARE who had participated in this previous study, and so I had reams of data. I was interested primarily in individual differences, and so, for instance, administered the 16PF, got sample lucid dreams, that sort of thing. So anyway, that became my dissertation. And I went on to got a job in Pennsylvania at a university, and then went on. I guess the first time was to present it at Sleep Research Society. Used to have a lot more with dreaming, and met Stephen LaBerge. And we then started to work together for about the next decade or so until I immigrated.
Very cool. So let's jump into the games because it's very interesting. I have a feeling you were researching this before it even came on my radar, but how games affect consciousness or awareness and attention, and then made the connection, I guess, to lucid dreams, and actually demonstrated how hardcore gamers have more frequent lucid dreams.
Yeah, it's not as robust as the control finding. And by robust, I mean sometimes we find the association between gaming and lucidity, and sometimes not as much. Well, it's dream control. Almost every single study I've ever done where I ask about dream control, there's superiority among gamers. There's only one study where I didn't find it. I was amazed.
Right.
And I've done probably 20 or 30 studies at this point.
And so
that's very, very robust. Lucidity, is there. Oh, I wanted to read you this one. Shoot, I meant to look it up too. Maybe I can dig it up. Now, it's a great case, and I think you would love it for your audience. And I have the permission of the author. It's a student of mine, and he had nightmares. One of the major findings that we've had in our research is something called the nightmare protection effect. Mm-hmm. Here it is. He was writing, my students write little mini essays, for courses. And this is a course on psychology of consciousness. And he wrote this essay about how he had been having nightmares as a child, and felt quite victimized by them. And then, basically I started playing video games, which, I don't know how old you are, but basically all my students begin, as my children, they used to fight over the Nintendo. I mean, they play video games.
Yeah.
So, and he talks about how the gaming changed the nightmares. It was classic nightmare protection, where before he was victimized by them. They were too frequent. It was really, clearly there's something going on in his life. What, I don't know. Although children in general report more nightmares than adults. And the empowerment of the games, and how the nightmares turned into, as I often hear from my gamers, they're fun. There's a monster chasing me. Awesome. They turn and fight back. And we've done various studies now confirming the nightmare protection effect. Now it's this immediate, you don't feel victimized by the nightmare, but rather empowered by the nightmare, which is, of course, a totally different thing. That doesn't mean that, therefore, it's the psychologically healthiest thing to do. I think if you're having nightmares, you kind of got to think about why,
right?
Psychologically speaking, nor does it necessarily touch on every reason why you can have a nightmare. The most frequent nightmare, I mean, dream so scary that it wakes you up. The most frequent scenario is some kind of chase, and you can't, escape, and so you wake up. In that scenario, they're empowered. They fight back. They have, all kinds of empowerment that you don't see in the normal nightmare sufferer. And so they will say things like, I have nightmares. Yeah, I have them a lot. Yeah, they're fun. And at first we're like, what? And then as we look more into it, we're able to see that. It isn't necessarily that they have fewer. They're probably less likely to call them nightmares. And even if they do call them nightmares, they're more likely to say it's fun. Now, that's in part the control.
Yeah.
They feel empowered in that environment. And sometimes it's lucidity.
Yeah.
That they know that it's a dream. And that,
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about to get us some clarification about the control, because that's interesting on its own. And is it generally control whether they're lucid or not, or specifically if they're lucid, having
No,
more
no,
control?
no. Or control in any sample is orthogonal to lucidity.
Right. Okay.
Initially, sure, we used to think, well, they went together. It became very clear you can control elements of the dream and be clueless about whether or not
Of
you're really
course.
lucid.
Yeah.
And the research is supported that. So sure, sometimes they are, but other times, like there's one famous case that I've cited many times, and that was of a young man who'd been playing Halo all day and watching some cartoons, doing some other things. In any case, that night he had a dream and went here, went there. Eventually, he was in third person, so he's flying behind himself as he was driving a car, and the car got in an accident and exploded into flames. And so there's him driving the car and there's him watching. And so the him driving the car started to get out. And then watching him thought, I wonder what it'd be like to die. You don't get this in dreams much. And so he stayed. Now, when we asked him questions about that dream, I assumed it was lucid, or at least that he felt some control over it. He insisted no, he had no idea that it was a dream. He had, wouldn't necessarily call it a control dream. But if you read the transcript as you go deeper into the dream, he starts talking about the polygons. He thought he was in a virtual world.
Yeah.
And of course he felt, well, what would it be like to die? And yeah, let's do this and let's do that. So we did a study looking at when gamers, when you game the day before, and we got 180 people who had played video games the day before and had a full night's sleep, which is of course necessary, and felt rested. In any case, most of the time they do not dream about a game. But when they do, I'm saying like 60%. Okay, so the 40% that do something like that do dream about gaming, most of those, they think they're in the game. So it's one of the, that's the reason that this fascinates me, is the confusion with reality, that they get confused. They don't know, is it a dream? Is it a game? Is it a virtual world? Is it waking reality? In the same way that dream people will talk about, they thought it was real and they asked a friend and realized, no, it was just a dream. Or in the dream, you wake up, only to wake up to realize that you were dreaming you woke up, false awakenings.
Yeah.
That kind of confusion that we're, of course, in the dream community, we're very familiar with, has added another dimension with virtual worlds. And initially it was most dramatic with video game players, because relative to all the uses of the internet and its progeny, gaming was the most immersive, the most 3D, the most interactive. And so now we're getting the actual formal 3D goggles being introduced. They're certainly going to redefine the internet. I just think it's going to increase the confusion over these realities. That could be okay, and it's kind of fun and interesting, and it could be troublesome.
Right. But you see some comments I've seen of yours online, you seem to have sort of predicted that virtual reality is going to have some kind of effect on many things, amongst them dreams and lucid dreams, and in some ways, and I've seen it on virtual reality forums on Reddit and some other places where people just report random lucid dreams, and I think you've done some kind of a study, or at least a survey, about the connection between virtual reality and lucidity.
Yeah, I had an article in Dreaming, the magazine for the International Association for the Study of Dreams, that reported on one of those studies. We did 3. 2 where we had the Oculus Rift, the developers kit 2, did 2 studies in the lab, and a third one was a survey with developers and early adopters. There were some really interesting anecdotes that are in there, and so I looked at that one. The studies are very preliminary. There's some methodological issues. I think the only thing I can say at this point, which is kind of interesting, is if you get people, they're not used to using VR goggles at this point, it's still pretty new. And you get them in the lab and you ask them to remember a dream from before the lab. Okay, so they had no exposure to VR. This happened last night, night before, whatever. And then you expose them to these goggles where they're like, whoa, because I mean, the first thing they look all around and they go, wow, and oh my God, it's so real. And, because your entire visual field is replaced. And then you ask them, after they've been on the goggles, you ask them about this dream that they had before the lab. Okay, that's really important to understand that. Yeah. They're more likely to be confused in their attribution of, was it a lucid dream before the lab or not? No confusion about nightmares, no confusion about control, no confusion about 5 or 6 different other dimensions. But lucidity, it's like really easy to destabilize someone's sense of what's real, which of course, we know in psychology.
Yeah.
And that's what these goggles are doing. And that's what gaming does. I mean, particularly the work done on game transfer phenomenon, that they've really got a long way with it. And this is in waking. And of course, one could argue that to some extent, dreaming about games is a version of game transfer, but I take it more in the classical dream research perspective. But game transfer is like, I had a student who lived in a farm. He was playing a video game all day, and he had to go out and milk the cows. So he went out there and he started trying to push imaginary buttons, which didn't work to milk a cow, Or I had another friend, or my son will say, after he was done playing, I think Grand Theft Auto, one of those. And he says he went into a bank and he's scoping out the cameras. Normally he doesn't care where the cameras are.
I'm familiar with that experience. Yeah.
Yeah, but you've been doing it. Or another colleague of mine, I don't know what this gaming stuff's all about. So he forced himself and he played, I guess it was Grand Theft Auto again for several hours. Then he got in his car and he's driving across town, and he said, I had these impulses to run people down.
Me and the girlfriend are playing a game called The Witness, which I highly recommend. And you're solving puzzles in this beautiful virtual world. With a dot that runs over lines, and there's like pattern recognition, and you have to spot some of these, and now we sort of see these patterns everywhere and want to complete the puzzle in the real world. It's kind of funny.
No, you do, and you easily dream about it. I mean, all you do is play a lot of Tetris, and you'll see that you're dreaming about it.
Yeah.
But.
I definitely used to have, and this was with the original GTA. I'm 36, and I had a computer since the Commodore 64.
Sure.
But when the first GTA came, and it was like a view from above, not the 3D, more immersive one, and a few other games very similar, where the whole thing looks the same throughout the game. When I would close my eyes, I would continue to see the pattern running, like the car
absolutely.
moving.
Yeah, that's just. I mean, you can do that with various kinds of flashing lights.
Right.
Close your eyes, and you see the after image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do want to ask you about some about the connection between video games and meditation, and maybe the connection of that to lucid dreaming. But before that, can you speak a little about games as a therapy for nightmares, especially with soldiers? I know you.
Well, that's tricky because. On the one hand, soldiers do game. They game hugely. Mm-hmm. They talk about gaming. They'll be in battle, and then they'll come back. I've had them write and tell me, I'm killing real, in battle with real blood. And then I come back and play bloody video games as if I don't have enough violence. They're themselves, puzzled about it.
Yeah.
But also because it's so pervasive, the enjoyment of gaming, and particularly first-person shooter or combat-centric games. Mm-hmm. One guy wrote and said he's got PTSD and he really wants to game. I think a new COD had come out or something.
Yeah.
And he said he just can't. It just triggers flashbacks.
Mm.
So for some, we did one study with the military, and we definitely found a difference in nightmare protection. Heavier gamers, so the one dreams I often point to, there's one from Heavier Gamer where they can pull the trigger, they're shooting people, they're hitting the targets, they're feeling scared, and it's not like it's happy stuff. Whereas someone who rarely gamed, there was 1,000-pound trigger pull. They couldn't pull the trigger. They were missing their targets all the time. They had no place to hide. They were powerless. So again, both are distressed. I mean, this is combat, and in a dream you think it's real, but the gamer was empowered. He knew what to do.
Yeah, it wasn't like a complete foreign experience, even if it's
right. He wasn't
different.
victimized by it as much as, not to say he wasn't distressed. So
Right.
say go play video games in order to treat post-traumatic stress disorder. They do, in fact, in virtual reality labs, they have, like, for instance, Virtual Iraq is a game that's been developed to help treat, basically using a version of systematic desensitization, where you set up a hierarchy. So you start out, you're walking through the streets of Baghdad in a safe situation, not holding a weapon, nothing. And then you gradually increase the similarity to the trauma, whatever it is. And you associate at each level with calming music and, sort of a meditative kind of thing. And so in that sense, gaming or virtual reality essentially can be the stimuli, rather than in systematic desensitization, rather than using pictures or photographs or whatever. And it's much more engaging. But they also use it for training. It's a whole lot cheaper to train soldiers in a virtual reality gaming kind of scenario where they're actually standing still and they have guns that are hooked into the game situation, and the character, and they're wearing the head-mounted goggles. The characters are running around. That's cheaper than putting up buildings, at least in terms of some training. It's at a certain point, of course, it's you need more than that.
Right.
So, could it be used? Yes, it is being used, but tread cautiously.
Yeah. Well, I want to move on to the part about, I'm trying to figure out exactly how to ask this question, because there's definitely a connection between lucid dreaming and meditation practice. And my guess is that different meditation, practices might result in different capacity or increased capacity for lucidity. Obviously the Tibetans have been, the Tibetan Buddhists have been working for many, many, many years in cultivating dream awareness and even sleep awareness, supposedly. And you've made a connection, or at least on your podcast, there's an episode where you talk about video games as a sort of meditative thing. And I'm curious, one, if there is if all types of games create this, or is there a difference, let's say, between a game that just captures your attention for a long span of time, and a game that sort of forces you to focus in so increasing higher or better your capacity for focused attention, which would influence, in my opinion, your ability to lucid dream even more spontaneously.
Okay, so it depends. There's so many different genres of games, but one of the major ways in terms of meditation associations that is useful to classify games is games that are action, first-person shooter kind of games from casual games. Now, we're dropping out strategic games and a whole lot, okay?
Yeah.
But casual games are a huge industry. And there's a lot of research that casual games, something like Tetris or Match 3 or Hidden Object, I play casual games endlessly, that casual games are associated with a whole bunch of physiological and psychological variables that are essentially what you see in meditation. The relaxation response, lowered anxiety, lowered depression, and that's the reason why they're so wildly popular. They take your mind off your daily problems just sufficiently. They don't arouse you. They calm you down. So anyway, that work is fairly well established. Now, on the other hand, you don't get the kind of improvements in attention and spatial skills that in a casual game that you get in a first-person shooter or some kind of an action game. And so the extent to which you conceptualize meditation as a focused attention, then what you want to do is to look at the first-person shooter. I just had an article come out in This is the very last issue of 2000. When the heck was it? Yeah, I guess it was the last issue of 2015 and maybe first issue of 2016, Journal of Transpersonal Psychology, looking at a research study we did comparing gamers to people who engage in some kind of contemplative practice, prayer that's meditation-like or meditation, and found some interesting differences. The attention tasks that we measured was something called change blindness, and the gamers just completely blew them out of the water. Now, these are not 30-year monks, meditating in the Himalayas. That would probably be a different thing. But among college students, then we picked groups where the gamer group did not reported very low prayer or meditation, and the pray and meditation group reported very low gaming. So they were, mutually exclusive. But in terms of, for instance, the lucid dreaming, there the prayer meditation did, and we also had a control group that was low on both prayer and low on gaming. And so the prayer meditation group did better in the lucidity, but but as I often find, the gaming group did better on control.
Interesting.
And there's a bunch of things we looked at, and we've now replicated that twice, and we haven't published it yet, but we have some additional data, looking at that stuff. That's one of the I got to get to writing it up things.
Yeah. So do you think the part of the effects of games on dreams is the focus and or the being sort of while consciously awake, immersed in an environment where either it's a virtual environment and you're first person, or you're playing a sort of third person perspective, which is also common in dreams. It depends on the person, I guess.
No, in dreams, third person is not common. First person. In dreams, you think you are the dream ego. You're in it. Now, sometimes you will be third person, where you're watching yourself in the dream. But that's usually associated with what's called witnessing in the TM tradition. I think you'll also basically see it as you mature, and as your self-awareness and so forth, you become less embedded.
Right.
I had many discussions about this with the various TM researchers that I worked with for about a decade when I was in Iowa, and particularly Skip Alexander, and when he approached me because I was doing consciousness and sleep research and he was doing it. Nobody else in Iowa was in the early 1980s. And so he would talk about witnessing, which is, you're in a dream or asleep, but you're watching it. You're not actively engaged. You're not emotionally engaged. You could step into it.
Right.
Well, lucidity is an active engagement. Yes, you're dreaming, but you're engaged. So one of the problems is, of course, people get excited and they lose the awareness or they wake up.
Yeah.
And so it's that detachment, the classic detachment spoken of in the wisdom traditions. The detachment happens in witnessing. It doesn't really happen in lucidity. Can happen. You can move from lucidity to witnessing. And I talk about that in my book, which is sheer Skip. I'm just quoting Skip.
Yeah.
And so, in any case, you have a variety of skills that are relevant for lucidity, and related states that happen in different kind of games under different circumstances. It's a complex relationship, and much is yet to be unpacked about it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting because I didn't know, definitely not off the top of my head. Maybe I've read it at some point, but I didn't know the statistics about how common first person versus third person perspective in dreams, whether lucid or not, are. I was just sort of relying intuitively on my own experience, which is, I mean, again, I don't even know the statistics for myself, but it feels like it's about half and half, whether I'm lucid or not, that I'm either randomly, as far as I can tell, either in first person or in third person. And when I am lucid, it's common that it will switch whatever the first one was, it would switch to the other one as soon as I become lucid, which is, I don't know why, but a thing that happens, it seems. So, yeah, there are a lot still to research and learn about all these phenomena. So I'm going to let you go. I'm just curious if you're retiring just from teaching, or are you going to not continue to do research either?
I don't know.
Write a little, maybe?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm 70. Um, I don't have to. Uh, I mean, I'll do some.
Yeah.
I expect. I have so many studies that I've done that I have not written up. I just want to do what's fun.
I,
You
I'm
know?
I'm all for it. So
Yeah, it's like, and most of my peers when they get my age, they don't stop, but you dial it back quite a
yeah,
lot.
yeah.
And that's pretty much what I'm doing.
Well, that makes perfect sense, and I do wish you good luck, and hope to see still stuff you will come up with in the future, whether through your own research or collaborations or just input on other stuff that comes out.
Okay.
So Jayne, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate your time, and thanks again.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. So I hope you've enjoyed this interview, and you can find all the links and show notes on lucidsage.com/29. You can, of course, as always, reach me with any questions or feedback directly in email, contact@lucidsage.com, or of course on Twitter, as always, @the_lucidsage. If you want to support the podcast, you can now do it on patreon.com/luciddreaming or lucidsage.com/support with as little as $1 per episode. Or another way to support the podcast, of course, is to share it on social media and elsewhere and recommend it to friends you think who would like it. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and until next time, sweet and lucid dreams.